Thanks, Anton. Building up a little bit of a suspense there. All right, so very nice to see you all today here at MDC in the conference. I'm very proud to represent Cepeso at probably the biggest developer conference in Moldova. I'm Dionis. Nice to see you. I'm in the IT industry for like 10 years. I've held titles like senior engineer, staff engineer, tech lead, engineering manager. Nowadays, I work as a delivery manager at Cepeso. And other companies I've worked with are stuff like Crunchyroll, Klarna. These are companies that are very different in the way they work. They have employee size of like 200 to 6,000 employees. So obviously they work completely differently. Every company has their own stuff or their own way of working, let's say. And what I like to do, I like to analyze how these companies work and understand like what are the drawbacks and what are the benefits of how they work. So today we're going to talk a little bit about organizational design. If this works. Yep. So warning, my talk will be a little bit philosophical. Not as philosophical as Manuel's presentation, which I love, by the way. But yeah, I like to think a little bit too much about things. So that happens. So why did I want to talk about this, right? Well, first of all, it's a topic that interests me a lot, right? So that's why I talk about it. It interests me a lot since when I was an engineer. And I was thinking always like, hey, how does the way the company works, right? How does this affect my individual performance? How does that affect the performance of the group I'm working with, right? And so I tried to come up with a few like ideas or questions like, why will this be interesting? Even like to everybody, it sounds like organizational design, right? It's like a management weird thing. Well, how it will be useful for an engineer as well, right? So a good understanding of it will help improve your collaboration and communication within the team or when you're working with other teams, right? It will help understand decision-making in a company. Just from a higher level perspective, when you're aligned with how decision-making works in a company, then it really helps you just get shit done, you know? It helps enhance efficiency, so by understanding well how the workflows in your company work, right? And how you are implied or implicated in those workflows, it just helps you even influence them and monitor their performance. See, are they working well for you and for your team, or are they not really working well, right? So I asked ChatGPT, because it's the team of the year, right? I asked, like, what is organizational design? And it came up with this. It's a lot of weird words, a lot of like blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I don't mind it too much. If that does not make it clear for you, then just bear with me and I'll try to like make it clearer, you know? So, when I say organizational structure, most people think about this, right? This is just the standard, like you have a small company, a smaller org, and that's how it looks like in the way like the responsibilities and the work is shared or like across people, right? This is quite simple, but when companies grow and when they're bigger, like there are other forms of organizations that start showing up, and people start joking about it. I don't know if everybody can see. My favorite one is the one about Oracle. So there's like the red dots, right? That is legal. And the blue dots is engineering. Anyway, the actual way organizations work is like this. Right? So, point is, I found a nice picture of the same thing, right? And this actually goes to show how organizations work, because people do not really like staying in those nice lines that you saw on the first picture, right? They really like to build their own informal networks, right? They like to work with people, with other people that they actually like working with. And so these networks very often even influence heavily how decision-making works at a company, right? But if you remember, at the start I said that I'm an engineer, right? So as an engineer, what do I see here? You see, yeah, you see cluster, you see a distributed system. This is a distributed system. This is how, if you actually diagrammed all your microservice architecture, that's how it would look like, right? And it's messy. It's messy. As, okay, no swear words, I think Anton said. Anyway, this made me think also about this quote, right? Probably a lot of you know it. It says something like, hey, any organization that designs a system will produce a design that is similar, right? In a technical design that is similar to the way the organization's communication works. Sorry, my microphone. Ah, there we go. Right? And this is like quite a famous, very old, I think somebody earlier also mentioned it, very old law principle, I would say, that it's actually still quite actual and true today, right? So I was mentioning microservices, and I was thinking a little bit about, hey, how, so in the last 10 to 15 years, all organizations started, or like all IT companies, the bigger ones, started doing like, hey, monoliths are the old thing, microservices is the new thing, right? But if you read the blog posts or the stuff that, hey, Netflix, Spotify publish about what they did when they transitioned to microservices, right? They do not only talk about the technical aspects of it. They talk a lot about, hey, we had to change the way our organization works in order to like enable this new technical setup, let's call it, right? So before, monolith companies normally have something like, hey, a big operations team, a big QA team, a big development team that handle all those cross-cutting concerns across the company, right? And when microservices, and the change that these companies did, or at least the ones that did it successfully, right, is what they did is they created like teams that maintain a set of microservices, and these teams are cross-functional, right? They contain all the necessary qualifications within the same team. Like they have a backend engineer, they have a designer, they have a QA guy, they have something like that, right? And it depends on the team and what's their mission, on what is their vision. They might have a mobile engineer, maybe they don't have a mobile engineer, whatever. The point is that this team is able to get their shit done without having another central department that they depend on, right? So still, okay, like this is quite nice. Microservice architectures, we have cross-functional teams. The structure or the architecture of the systems that people design and that are still like big in production, so it still looks like this, right? Why? Because this is how people work, right? But this is how people just simply, that's just the way, the natural state where people like to work that way. And my thought, my insight that I've been thinking about it for a few years is like, hey, if we have the Conway's law, right, that shows a relationship between, hey, what's the organizational structure of a company and what is the systems that they create, can we turn that arrow around, right? What are some things that, with our experience as engineers, that we have about distributed systems, right? What are some things that apply the other way around to human systems, right? To human distributed systems. And there's like a lot of parallels that could be done here that would not fit in this talk. But I chose like two things that I think like immediately jumped to mind. Like two parallels that are actually quite interesting. One, chattiness. When we do microservices, what is the first and foremost thing we think about when we want to keep like the system performant and reliable, right? What is it? Well, network calls. We know that a network in a cluster is the slowest piece of the system, right? And that's why we work very hard to try and reduce and minimize the number of calls and make sure that the services have like clear dependencies between each other, right? Same in human systems, right? in human systems, I love this slide. In human systems, communication overhead is actually probably one of the biggest parts of most projects execution, right? It's the same like in a group of people trying to get something done, right? If the group is too big, if there's no clear leader, right? If people do not really agree on what is the direction, right? That is a big overhead. If you have to always reach out to somebody else to get something done, right? Then you're going to have that overhead all the time. So you can also model this a little bit. So these are like graphs, as people were saying. And the red dots are people, the edges are like the communication pathways that people take when talking to each other, right? So if we don't have anything to mitigate our communication costs, right? If like everybody would always have to talk with everybody, the worst case complexity of this like graph of all like the number of edges essentially that we know are the most expensive part is quadratical, right? And so what does that mean? When you have a conversation, where you have a decision-making process, right? And you're adding people to that decision-making process, what are you doing? You're not only increasing the communication overhead of that process, you're increasing it exponentially, right? That's the thing. So it's not true that everybody always has to talk with everybody else one-to-one, right? There are some mitigation strategies for this. Obviously, like having group meetings, always like making sure that, hey, we have a guy, that guy's going to be our communication hub, right? And he's going to make sure that everybody's on the same page and whatever. That works more or less. If you go a little bit by the theory, that is like a constant factor optimization. Like the overall complexity of this still keeps being quadratical. But if you have like a situation when you have a decision to take, and all of your stakeholders, you want them to be all aligned, right? All on the same page, and they have to get to a consensus, this is the situation you're going to get to, right? And this is why politics is shit. So when you have bad communication, when you have like not effective communication in a company, what happens? This often happens, right? So here I have like a couple of stories from my experience that I wanted to chat a little bit about. First one, well, this is not like a story from my experience. This is like a situation that comes up all the time. Probably most engineers here know about it. I just do, for example, refinement, right, of a task with somebody in my team. Maybe I do it myself. Maybe I talk about a task. I see like, hey, I'm estimating it. I take a quick look. Yeah, this is probably going to take me like a day, right? And then we go a little bit into details, and we're like, wait, but I need this data from this other team's system, right? And I need to agree with them, like, hey, how are they going to pass this to us? And I need to think about, like, hey, do they have everything that I need? And suddenly, it's not one day. Suddenly, it's like 3 days, maybe a week. And suddenly, I say, no, but this is going to take a long time. I have to talk to other people, right? This is the communication overhead. And a second example, like I had, in my experience, I had a small framework I built, right, for a feature that other teams had to integrate, right? And this framework was something very simple for other people to integrate. It was like a couple of scripts, right? And then I have a team that was to integrate. I send them the docs, right? I had written like docs exactly how to integrate. And they're like, yeah, please take a look. And if you have any questions, come back to me. I hear about, hey, yeah, the team estimated the work to 2 weeks. And I'm like, what? That doesn't make any sense. It's just a couple of scripts they have to add to their CI/CD pipeline, right? So I book a meeting with them, half an hour. I explain them like what to do, essentially, in detail, like what are the steps, and that's it. And from 2 weeks, the estimation changes to 2 days. Who is tracking that productivity gain? Nobody here is tracking that productivity gain. But that is the productivity gain of good communication. And that is why all of us need to work to have like good communication, whether we are managers, product managers, or engineers, right? So, Second parallel that I wanted to talk a little bit about. And this second part is about centralized bottlenecks in a cluster or in a distributed system, right? If you have like a central database in your microservice architecture, what are you doing, right? Most of us know that. And so we know that that is a big no-no. Any central service that all of the other services have to constantly call, that is a bad idea. That's going to be hard to scale. It's going to have a lot of traffic. If it goes down, then good luck. Everything else falls down, right? And again, I'm coming back to the story with the companies changing their organizational model to fit microservices. And this is like a depiction of the Spotify model. I do not want to go too deep into the details of the Spotify model. It's quite famous. Most people have heard of it. If you didn't, there's a lot of information about it on the internet. But what I want to point out is that, hey, it does define stuff like, hey, chapters, guilds, squads, tribes. All of that does not actually matter that much. What matters is the cross-functional team, a team that is autonomous and independent to get their shit done as much as possible, because no team can work in isolation, right? What if that doesn't happen, right? What if we still have like a central, I'll give an example that is quite common, a central operations team, right? What if you have a central operations team that everybody has to talk to get their shit done? And then one other team, right, that is not yours, for example, has like some big tasks that they need to throw at that operations team, and they get swamped. But all central teams, eventually they all get swamped, right? You have central infrastructure, central DevOps, central QA, they all get like a ton of work. And what happens is, I'm blocked, right? And then, yeah, people just get blocked on the time with that type of team setup, right? Some engineers may even get happy about it, like, yeah, I'm blocked, sorry, I do not have to, like, sorry, product manager, I cannot deliver this feature, it's their fault. That's the worst. That's when the frustration already happened. That's when it turned to passive aggressiveness. That's when the blame game starts, right? And people start pointing fingers at each other. That is the ultimate failure state of this type of thing, right? So, to recap, how do we keep a distributed system performant? Right? Well, keep the work parallel, and the groups doing the work as autonomous and independent as possible. But like obviously, that does not mean that every team can do everything they want in isolation, right? You cannot deliver, like a service in a microservice architecture, normally, it does not do much if it doesn't depend on anything else, right? When you're writing a code, a class that does not depend on anything, right, normally does not do that much, unless it's like only a static algorithm that can do. But most things require you to work with other people, and such is life. So yeah, try to make sure, like when we design microservices, what do we think about a lot, right? We have like our big business domain, and this business domain, we think very careful about how do we separate it in such services that we minimize the amount of network calls between them, that we have clear dependency lines, right? And we make sure that the systems, that the microservices, they have one clear responsibility, and they do not overlap between them, right? So that's the same that we need to be doing with our responsibilities, with the team's responsibilities, right? And then the next one is manage contention of shared resources, obviously. So the thing here is that, hey, actually, like even the companies, like if you ask somebody from management, from Spotify, they will tell you, yeah, that model requires more resources, you know? That model requires more people, because suddenly like you need to have an infrastructure guy on every team, or you have to have like one shared or that type of thing, right? So this is hard to solve, but it's always good to keep in mind that having a central resource is a problem. And when possible, right, you can mitigate some of the problems that come out of it. So if you know that a team will need a designer for the next 6 months, then put one in the team, right? Do not make that team's request go through a central design department. All right. Last thing I wanted to touch a little bit upon is this concept that you will see a lot especially in the big Swedish giants, more like if you see some presentations that they do, or maybe somehow get a hold of like what their values are in the company, you will see the principle of minimum viable bureaucracy, right? This is about, so bureaucracy and process are communication overheads that you just add to a project, right? Why? So if you have two groups of people that work well together and are delivering, what are you doing? Right? You're not doing anything. They work well together. That's fine. Good. If you don't, then you introduce a process to help them, right? To help them work better together. And yeah, you can consider like adding processes across teams, like something like creating a compatibility layer between people. That's a little bit pushing it as a comparison, but yeah. In any case, the core thing here is that bureaucracy and process are overhead and they are costs. They are not benefits. It's not a benefit to have a process. It's a cost. And it's a cost we need to pay in the cases where it's not avoidable, right? So I'll read it because I don't think people see it. Bureaucracy, the mortal fear that someone somewhere is working efficiently and without your permission. You will see that if you research it a little bit, the Swedish tech giants, what they do is actually they work hard to minimize processes as much as possible. So, thanks for staying with me a little bit on this like philosophical chat about how we work. And I wanted to have like a few closing words. I think for all of us working in the IT industry, I really believe that engineers, project managers, product managers, executives, good communication is the hardest part of our jobs to do well. And it's also one of the things that is most impactful in what we deliver, right? So a few things or a few principles that I abide by, let's say. Be kind to others, be empathetic, and most importantly, especially for us in Eastern Europe, we're not used to having this psychology. Assume good intentions from other people. Assume good intentions from your colleagues. Assume good intentions from people that talk to you on the street. And it's better to like be wrong when you assume good intentions than always think that, hey, other people have it for you. Maybe there are some exceptions there. Like if you're a bank, do not assume good intentions from your customers. But all right, that's mostly it. Thanks a lot to you, Peso, for allowing me to speak on the stage.
Yeah, so we have a time for a question. If you have a question, please raise your hand. Or I will raise mine. Okay, Igor.
Good day, thank you for your presentation. I have a small question. What do you think about ISO certifications for IT companies? From what I have observed, they require a lot of more processes than companies were using.
Well, I think, and actually, I am not directly involved, but I do have some knowledge about what needs to go there with the ISO certifications. They're kind of a necessary evil. It is a framework that ensures that there's a certain level or a certain standard minimum level of certification for the processes within a company, right? And that is not really what I'm talking about when I talk about minimum viable process, right? Because the ISO certifications, they only ask about like some really high-level type of things, right? And the process I'm talking about are processes of like workflows and ways of working across teams.
Right? Yeah, thank you. Woo, guys.